The Force was with us once again for another Star Wars day. Also, Jesus finds a home on Disney Plus, and an iconic Hollywood comedian declares that the movie industry is dead. We talk about all that and more on this episode of Faith and Pop Culture. Hey, well, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. It is me, your host, Daniel, and I am joined, as I always am, by the iceberg to my Titanic, Mr. Samuel David Camp. What is up?
Oh, not too much. Good to be with you. The heat is heating up here in southern U.S.
Oh, it's miserable. I finally had to put away my hoodie and go into t-shirt weather, so it's a sad day over here.
Solidly in t-shirt weather, unfortunately.
But speaking of another season that has been upon us, for those who celebrate, we had Star Wars Day. May the 4th
be with you.
One of the only good things about coming towards the summer months is that we do get that little reprieve of Star Wars Day.
Do you have annual celebrations over this holiday, Daniel, or do you have traditions surrounding May the 4th? Or?
See, well, it depends on sort of when the day falls, like in the year. But
it's usually on May the 4th.
But if it's like a weekend, or depending if I had the kids or what's going on. But I know I used to, like, before the kids were like in school, like we would marathon some Star Wars movies, and we would celebrate and make like Death Star waffles and stuff. But we did want to note that because, again, I think May the 4th happened right after our last episode, so we want to look back a little bit because it is curious, like, just how like Star Wars is going strong still. Like I know things have changed, and I did take, speaking of celebrating the day, I took my kids to see The Phantom Menace. Episode 1 was re-released in theaters, so I took them to see it in theaters.
That's fun.
And the movie's still not good at all, but they loved it. It was their first time to like see Star Wars on the big screen.
That's special.
And like there is something special about, like, no matter how bad the rest of the movie is, like
the opening credits.
As soon as you see, like, the title crawl is coming up, and you hear, like, John Williams' score, like, it's like I miss, like, I know we've had a bunch of Star Wars shows, but like I miss being in a theater and like everyone going quiet, and you see sort of a long time ago. And
I think there is something like unparalleled in like the experience of seeing like the Star Wars title credits and that intro. Like I don't think there is a more iconic like start to a movie that's ever been created. Like I think that is like worth the price of admission.
Like it's like a cultural rite of passage. Like to be there and like, because everyone's excited, then everyone goes like hush, and they see it coming, and the music comes, and everyone cheers, and they get. Again, like, I'm too young to have seen the originals. I did see the special editions when they did release those back in the day. I remember, like, one of my like 9th birthday party or something. We went to Return of the Jedi, so I did see some of those. But why do you think that is? Like, why do you think? Like, obviously, Star Wars. The fact that we haven't had a movie for a while, and like, it's not as dominant, and like, it's not crushing it as much as it's not in its prime anymore.
No,
but like things like this show, like, because again, like, they re-released this movie from like 20 years ago, and it finished like number 2 in the box office. Like enough people saw this old movie
that wasn't good.
That wasn't even good.
Like everyone, like no one was surprised by what they saw. Like
but there's still something about these stories that like draws us.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is just the I don't want to say simplistic nature, but maybe that is it. It's a pretty like straightforward, down the middle, good versus evil, David versus Goliath sort of story that, at least the original 3 were well acted, and like the characters were great. The story was easy, it's straightforward. It didn't get too bogged down in other stuff. And so I think just sort of that clear, simple story. I don't know. I think that's maybe the bulk of it.
Because it very much is like Joseph Campbell's like the hero's journey. I guess the very archetypal, like like universal, like myths that we sort of live by, that I feel like does still, like, which is why it's timeless. Like why these movies are like the original movies are just as awesome for my kids watching them as they were when I was watching them, as they were when my parents were watching them. Which I feel like the newer, like, this is just my hot take. And again, we don't want to do this like a whole Star Wars episode, but
but we do.
We do. But we won't. We'll restrain ourselves. Like, I feel like part of why they've they've lost some of that. There's lots of reasons, but
Yeah.
I feel like they have really from probably like the Last Jedi, Ryan Johnson's like um, episode number 8, like have started to stray away a little bit from some of those like the hero's journey. It's a
Yeah.
lot more like, well, there's good and bad, but we're all sort of gray. We're all in the middle, and it's the rebels. They were good guys, but now they kind of do bad things too, and and there's a place for some of that.
Yeah.
But I feel like some of those like just the basic like morality questions and things just aren't the same anymore. Like we're sort of playing around like on the fringes, and I don't know. I don't know if Star Wars like works the same way. And I don't know. Like we were talking before we filmed. Like I don't even know if the Star Wars universe is necessarily all that interesting. Like there's nothing about the world of Star Wars like other than like it looks cool and there's ships and stuff. But like
Yeah.
there's no real like there's not a whole lot of depth to like the world building.
Yeah.
Like there's like the histories and some of that, but like the planets and the technology and like the cultures and like it's just sort of like a lot of characters and aliens and stuff, and they're all
Yeah.
somewhat interchangeable. I feel like what did give it power was like sort of the mythology aspect to it.
Yeah, I think the mythology and just the storytelling, like it didn't, I don't feel like it tried to really, at least again, going back to the original trilogy, like they didn't really explain a lot of stuff. And I feel like subsequent episodes and movies and shows maybe try to do more explanation, and it's just not as good. And it's not as interesting in a lot of ways. It's just sort of like this is the story about a hero, farm boy taking on the empire, impossible task, and succeeding, versus like, here are these factions and this and some of that is, I mean, I love a good political thriller as much as the next guy, but I feel like it kind of loses its way in subsequent like additions to the franchise. And so I think we're still benefiting from like the greatness that was the original trilogy. Like I don't know that has really been improved upon through the years. And so it's like not Disney, but Star Wars today I think has a sort of cultural relevance because of the original trilogy, and in spite of some of the
Yeah, it has a lot of like cultural goodwill. You
yeah.
wonder how long. I mean, like my kids are, they love Star Wars, and um, you know, so maybe some of that will pass on. But yeah, you sort of wonder like how long will like May the 4th continue to be,
I mean, I think I don't think it's going anywhere, and I think there is just something because of like the Force and the Jedi and the Sith. Like I think that sort of mythology and just sort of the magic of that will probably last for a very long time. Um,
I mean, like all it takes is like one awesome new Star Wars movie, and then like everyone's gonna be like, Star Wars is back, baby. Like
yeah,
to get momentum, like you just sort of need I think, some better stories, and I think eventually they will crack the code in sort of the Disney era of Star Wars. But speaking of Disney, kind of another news thing that's unrelated to Star Wars, although both center in on Disney, that sort of stood out to me this week is that the chosen, not the chosen one who will bring balance to the Force, but the chosen as in the disciples of Jesus. The hit show kind of from, originally from, or still from Angel Studios. The creator, Dallas Jenkins, kind of shared this past week that seasons 1 through 3 are getting a first-time release on Disney Plus. So
there you go.
Uh,
All those people who cancel their Disney subscriptions are going to have
quickly,
to
resubscribe to
quickly sign back up.
So he kind of in that kind of announcement or sharing, he shared an article that was announcing it, and in his quote he said, season ones are now getting to another new audience, and then kind of some of the kind of the creatives involved in it were sort of talking about that, reaching this new audience. So a quote I pulled from Relevant Magazine from Kevin Young, who's like a vice president of marketing, says part of the goal at The Chosen is to get the show in front of as many people as possible. He says it took the first 4 years of the series to reach 100 million people, and then in the last 15 months, we've reached another 100 million people. And I think there's some interesting aspects to this, but I think just like a base level, like it is interesting to have such like a obviously very explicitly faith-based or like a Christian religious story will now be featured on Disney, which
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily always have the reputation for that kind of storytelling.
Yeah, you wonder how many like brains are short circuiting, you know, like you've been programmed to hate Disney for so long, but they have the Jesus show. What do I do? Like, do I get Disney? Do I not?
Yeah, you get The Chosen and you get Bluey. Like, I feel like that's a double 1-2 punch to giving a lot of goodwill for.
Yeah, I mean, again, like we're not here to sort of debate the merits of canceling your Disney subscription or what have you, but um, yeah, I mean, I think it's great, and I think it reveals, as has always been the case, that Disney is maybe parts of it are ideologically driven, but those parts get overridden when money is on the table, and so I think their ideology is only as strong as their, I guess, wallet, or I don't know what the right analogy is there, but I think there's a lot of hand wringing, or there has been a lot of hand wringing about Disney, and they're coming for your kids, and you know we've covered many stories on that topic, but this kind of again just shows you that Disney's less concerned about ideology and more concerned about, you know, what makes money, what pays the bills.
Yeah, because I feel like in some sense, like both is true. Like
Yeah.
I think it can't be denied that are there a lot of people, creatives in Hollywood, who get employed in various capacities by Disney, who like have a clear agenda
Oh,
or
for
like
sure.
a worldview, an ideology that doesn't align with the Bible. Like obviously that's going to be true of like almost any field of our society, but especially like when it comes to like the arts and stuff. But I feel like sort of the idea that like Disney as like an entity is like their mission, their values is like to just go after Christian, like the way we talk about Disney's
Yeah.
coming for you, and it's like their goal is to make money. Like, and I think even like some of the recent like Bob Iger, their returned CEO like a month or two ago when he was talking about like prioritizing entertainment over messages, like was sort of like his admission that like we need to worry about keeping people happy and making money.
Yeah.
No, we need to sort of restrain some of those people that we are employing from pushing agendas, because what really matters at the end of the day is that Disney makes us a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I do think I think the money goal does trump like the messages, and I do think as Christians we can kind of fall back on just like that there's this anti-Christian bias all the time, and like there's just no room for like faith stories in Hollywood, and like
Yeah.
and it's like you keep seeing examples of like Hollywood and like either distributing or like housing it on their streaming platform, of like or like Netflix making like Moses documentary. Like there clearly is still an openness to.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as those things are going to draw in subscribers and make money,
Right.
it doesn't seem like there's any hesitancy to like no, like we don't want to make money from that because it's faith based. It's like
Yeah, well, I would say, and I think we've said this before, but like I feel like now is sort of the golden era of faith-based entertainment, because not only are major platforms and studios producing and distributing faith-based content, but you also have like these other sort of adjacent studios and distribution hubs that are also creating all their own content. Like there's like Bent Key, Angel Studios, obviously, and a lot of other places where you can go to find lots of almost weekly some faith-based content that's new. And so I think there is lots of room for faith-based content in Hollywood, and I just think we've got to kind of break away from sort of the Hollywood monolith idea that like Hollywood is anti-faith and only like some of these other places are pro-faith, and it's like never the twain shall mix. But it's like, no, you can look and see there's just actually quite a lot of faith-based content that is widely available.
And this like with like Dallas Jenkins quote and stuff, like it's almost, again, and this is just one situation, but like almost reflects like a return to, like I feel like originally when it came to like faith-based stuff, it was like we need to like infiltrate Hollywood, and like we need to make these movies and put them where the people are at theaters, put faith-based stuff, and
yeah,
and then like as time has gone on, and like maybe the rest of the other movies have got filled with more content, it seems like the mindset, like the mission shifted to like, okay, Hollywood is beyond saving. Like the
Yeah.
regular is too far gone. Like we need to make our own platforms and our own companies and like our own and like just sort of recreate, a different version of Hollywood.
A Christian Hollywood.
And not be, and just keep ourselves separate. Where this is almost seems like reflecting kind of the original thing of like,
Yeah.
hey, it's good to have stories of Jesus on a Disney platform alongside stories that are not about Jesus or honoring to
Yeah.
Jesus. Like there's value in that as opposed to just sort of recreating our own, only Jesus sort of type stories. And I am curious. Sort of the other question, and we don't have any answers to give, so we can't do that. But just to speculate on, like, I am curious, and like the marketer vice president talking about the 100 million first couple of years, 100 million, like sort of the idea of reaching new audiences is, I've always just been curious, how many how many people will be reached by something like this, like how many people that aren't
Yeah.
already like sort of the core, like by putting it on Disney Plus, how many like non-believer type audiences are going to click on it as opposed to like Christians that have Disney and now have access to, well, I guess I should
Yeah.
like I'm sure they probably have some of that data, but it's always just sort of being a hard thing to judge. Like numbers don't tell the whole story. Like they
Yeah.
tell
Well,
that it's successful, people are watching it. They don't necessarily tell you as much of like what kind of people. Like, are we
who's watching
really,
it? Yeah.
are we just getting Christians more involved in watching shows? Like, or
Yeah.
are we really sort of, like how far have we come in like reaching general audiences?
Yeah. I mean, I think like The Chosen is sort of its own thing, and I think it is quite a bit different than other faith-based properties, and that it's about the life of Jesus. And so it's like I think what you see is what you get, and whereas some of these other movies that are like it's a movie about a harrowing person, and turns out he's a Christian. Wow, gotcha. So there's less of the sort of sneaky attempts of sharing faith and that kind of thing. But um, I think with being on Disney, it certainly is going to be in front of more people. And I think probably how they're looking at it is now we're just lowering the barrier for people to connect with our content, uh, that being The Chosen. And so certainly I think more people will see it now than when it was only available through like Angel Studios and their app. It's like even I'm not going to go and download a separate app to view something, even if it's free. And so I think now with it being up there next to your other Disney offerings, I think if people have an interest or have heard of it, it's way easier now to go in and okay, I'll just watch the first
Yeah, it's
episode.
almost like putting a book on Amazon, like as opposed to
Yeah,
like it's, that's where people go, even if it's available for cheaper elsewhere or something, which
yeah,
it's never cheaper
yeah.
off of Amazon, but like just putting it where the people are, like
Right,
people use this app, it might be free on the Angel Studios website, and like, but it's just people don't. That's not part of their routine. Like how to,
right.
they haven't used that. Like some of them will still, obviously, a lot of people will still do that, but yeah, more people. There's less barriers now for like,
Yeah,
oh, here's this. Like I keep seeing this advertised, or I've heard about this, or or even someone that just wants to like hate watch it and they're not a Christian. Like, oh, let's see what this is, and like, who knows? But I have always been curious about some of that. Like, how do we just sort of, even like box office numbers of these faith-based films, like they tell that people are going. They just don't necessarily always tell a whole lot of nuance of like, you know, are we
yeah.
just getting more Christians that like, I don't go to movies, but I'm gonna go support this one. It's a faith-based film, or it's
Right. I think there's always going to be that, and I just don't know that there's a real easy way to be able to say like, hey, our show is way more like missional, than some other show or something. Like I don't know that there's a way to really break that down and to show that like few, more non-Christians saw our film than Christians. Like I don't know. I'm sure, Google probably knows that because they know everything about you. But aside from them, like, how can you really parse those numbers? And then also the 100 million in the first 3-4 years, and then another 100 million in just over a year. How much of that too is just like repeat? Like it's just hard to know. Like Is it just now way more popular, and some of those people that saw the first few are now coming back around and watching it again? Like, you can say a lot of different things with numbers, and so yeah, I don't,
Yeah, clearly, however you slice the numbers, like it's massive success.
yeah,
It's just sort of like, yeah, how you parse that out to what that reveals has always is interesting. But hey, if you guys have been waiting to check out The Chosen and haven't yet, maybe you can now on the Disney Plus streaming platform. But The Chosen is doing well in Hollywood, but movies in general maybe aren't doing quite as well. Some might even say that the business itself has died. So kind of our
who would say such a thing, Dan?
who would must be some old comedian out there on the press tour. So kind of final thing for us to kind of story wise to get into. It's just sort of a quote that I just thought was really interesting because there's a lot of ways we can kind of dig into this. But so Jerry Seinfeld, iconic comedian, he's been out promoting his very interesting new film about Pop-Tarts. I have not checked this movie out, but
that is one movie that I would like to see. I haven't.
I mean, as someone that has partaken in Pop-Tarts
I've had my share of Pop-Tarts.
Yes, like sometimes we keep them for my kids, and it's like, they're off at school, and like I need breakfast, and you sort of look over, and it's never even like strawberry. It's like snickerdoodles, or like it's like pure. It's like a candy bar, and it's like,
yeah,
is that a healthy breakfast? But anyways, he's been promoting this new movie, and he had an interview in GQ magazine where he was sort of talking about just the movie and the industry and his career, and he made
this is his first feature film directorial debut.
Is it though? Because
I think.
Did he direct? He made the Bee movie. You remember the Bee, like the animated?
But I feel like
I don't know if he directed. I feel like we'll fact check that. But yeah. But again,
I think it is like the first, like maybe like non-animated.
Yeah, and that was a long time. And again, I don't know if he even made that one or if he just like produced it or something. But so he's given an interview and he's talking about talking with some of his friends in the industry, and he said this. He said they don't have any idea that the movie business is over. They have no idea. Film doesn't occupy the pinnacle in the society cultural hierarchy that it did for most of our lives. When a movie came out, if it was good, we all went to see it. We all discussed it. We quoted lines and scenes we like. Now we're walking through a fire hose of water, just trying to see.
Which is a great description, I feel like, of the current media landscape.
Yeah, well, I resonated with that. Like walking through a fire hose, just trying to see. But that one quote, the film, that the film industry business is over, and that it doesn't occupy, the pinnacle anymore. A lot of like sites and people have like kind of run with that because that sort of is like a buzzy.
That'll get views.
Yeah,
that sells.
But I thought we could kind of get into that because there is one sense of like, there's always gonna be these like kind of older entertainers that like, like you get like the Scorseses or the different people like Ridley Scott's of like just sort of these grumpy and they like things aren't like they used to be back in the day.
Yeah.
And when you're promoting a movie, you want to say these like hot takes and things that have podcasts like ours talking about it.
And here we are talking about this movie.
So there is some sense, take all these things with a grain of salt as far as like, is he overstating his case, perhaps? But I do think that is an interesting observation of like, hey, maybe the movie industry isn't dead. Like, movies still seem to do well, but is he right that films no longer occupy like the pinnacle? Like that's because like we tend to think of when you think of like, hey, the arts and entertainment industry, I feel like 9 out of 10 people are going to think of movies, not music or video games or even TV or some of the other things like like movie stars and movies and like blockbusters and like because that has been the pinnacle for decades now, like a century, really since movies started. And the question is like, has that finally shifted? And like, so what is he right? Is the movie industry dead?
I don't think it's dead. I think it has. There has been.
Support.
Yeah. Well, I don't even know that it's like. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say because I think when you talk about some of these actors or some of these movies, like a lot of people are at least familiar with that, versus the more like niche online entertainment that like yes they're doing extremely well, but also they they don't have as broad a reach as like a movie does. And so I think in a lot of ways it is still um, maybe the pinnacle. I think it depends on how you look at it, but I think it is. I don't know that it's been replaced yet. It's just there's a lot of other stuff that is vying for your attention now. Like I think movies can still sort of break through that noise, probably more than like a YouTube video or a TikTok video. Um, I think a movie can still break through some of that noise, but there's just way more noise from you name it, like any other media technology, whether it's social media or TikTok, YouTube, streaming. And so, yeah, I mean, I think in some senses he's right. In other senses, maybe not quite.
Yeah, it's definitely being, I think, challenged, like the
Yeah.
supremacy of like movies. And I do think, like, in one sense, like movies are still the most like universal or unifying, or I mean, not that we agree on them, but like kind of cultural conversations.
Yeah.
A big movie comes out, you see a lot of people talking about that, as opposed to like, this influencer on TikTok, like who may be actually reaching a bigger audience and having more impact, but like because there's a lot of those sort of people, like it's not like
Yeah.
the kind of touchstone cornerstone stuff that
Yeah.
like film is.
I mean, I think the other thing too is like the theater is also just. I don't think that the theater is the pinnacle that it used to be for sure. Um, Whether or not movies are, I think is maybe the better question is sort of parsing out like the theater experience versus like the movie industry. And I know like that's how the movie industry has survived is because of theaters. But with so much shifting to streaming now, it's not as critical, um, or at least from a consumer point of view or from an audience point of view. A lot of us just don't go to the theater because it's inconvenient and expensive, and I can see it with my included streaming platform in a month or two. So it's like there's not that sort of drive to go to the theater and us all see the same movie roughly the same time.
Yeah, and I do think like with all these entertainment stuff, like the pendulum always swings. Like I feel like streaming will diminish from here. Like it's just
Yeah.
not as like financially viable.
Yeah,
Like
and you're
once it'll
seeing
drop
that.
off, like
Yeah.
there's gonna be a more shift, and then maybe the theaters will become more prominent. But I do think too, like this is like a rule of thumb, is like the more movies there are, the less influential each movie is. Like
Yeah.
like back in the day when there was just like, handful of movies, and that was, so we all sort of shared this like imagery, and like we all went to this movie, and like Seinfeld said, we talked about it. That gets diluted when you have like
Yeah.
just endless amounts of movies and streaming and theatrical, and whatever, startup company has their own movies they're releasing, and like, you know not that they're not influential anymore, but like the potency of like that message
Yeah.
is watered down. And sort of like I feel like as Christians, like why does this matter if it does? I feel like it is important to almost like update our like understanding of sort of the entertainment, like because I feel like we still very much, if you look like just broadly online, like operate on the basis of like movies are the big thing. Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of outrage or talk about like this new movie in the scene, like
Movie and or Hollywood as a whole.
yeah,
Like
and like this new blockbuster is gonna have like it has this ideology, like we gotta be, it's dangerous because this is gonna shape our country, and like I feel like the reality is like people are being, especially like younger generations, are being shaped probably a lot more by these other things, like I think social media and
oh
TikTok and
yeah.
YouTube and like kind of influencers, and like a lot of that culture, is having more of an impact than like this one movie that had this message.
Yeah.
And I feel like we don't, or even like even music and stuff. Like I know like if like Taylor Swift, we maybe Christians will open their eyes to like or look at her lyrics because she's so big, but like we don't know a lot of other,
Yeah.
like we don't keep up with that industry the same way we do.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's just Hollywood slash movies is a great sort of boogeyman, I think, for the church, and it's kind of easy. It's kind of all laid out there, and so it's easy to sort of preach against or rail against or be outraged about. Whereas it's just way harder when it's just so diffuse now, and it's like you have Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, X, and then all the streaming platforms. It's like, well, so where does, and like it's so, and I think we were saying this before we went started recording, is uh it's so much more personalized now, like your entertainment, because it's like, well, even a family isn't necessarily always going to like all watch the same movie together. Like I think oftentimes families are now like, well, the wife is watching this, husband's watching that, the kids are on their tablets or playing a game. So it's like everything is so much more individualized and personalized as far as entertainment goes, that there's just fewer and fewer of those opportunities for everyone to come together and view one piece of entertainment, and even much less so expand that out to societies, neighborhoods, and
Well, and I feel like too,
countries.
like kind of by being more personal. The other sense of that is like, a lot of the things that I feel like have replaced the entertainment, like the movie business, is like kind of influencers, right? Content creators, or
Yeah.
like, and I feel like in general, and I haven't thought deep enough to land too confidently on this thought, but I feel like people are always going to be more influential than like things, like even like
Yeah.
a story. Like a movie has a story, and it's obviously made by a creator and human and all that kind of stuff. But I feel like sort of like an actual person, like some of these like content creators, like
Yeah.
you're more going to that, that community on the basis of like the person, like what they
Yeah.
create is almost secondary to like, you
Yeah.
support them, not just like,
Right.
I don't care who they are, but I like this video that they do. I guess.
Well, I think what you're seeing is with that, with sort of the creator economy, if you want to call it that, is the influence of perceived authenticity. And so like someone can be talking straight to camera, sharing their story, whatever, and that is perceived as far more authentic. We can have big debates on whether or not it's authentic, but it's at least perceived as more authentic than, like, when you go to a movie, you're going to a movie, and you're watching a piece of entertainment, you're watching a story, it's not real, but it's entertaining, versus, somebody on social media, whether it's an entertaining story or not, there is a perception of authenticity, because like, I'm looking at the person who's making this, and they're telling me whatever it is they're telling me. And that, I think, is far more powerful.
Which I feel like it's because you can almost like, I wonder if there's a connection with, people have debated like, the age of the movie star is done. Like outside of like one or two people, there's not a whole lot of movie stars that can like sell movies now. Like it's not really about like, like back in the day, you put Harrison Ford and think it's going to do well. You put, some of these more classic guys in, where like nowadays you can put big name people in their movies, don't necessarily. But I feel like directors can still sell it. Like, you get a Christopher Nolan movie or Spielberg movie, or, Villeneuve, like, and I feel like maybe it's some of that's because, you're connecting it to the creator. So there is more of an attachment to the story they're telling, and you sort of, you sort of follow their thoughts on this story. But I do think it is interesting, and I feel like it's easier too to follow movies. Like, like we review movies at the Collision. I don't review TikTok channels. Like there's too much, and I just, I'm willing to see a lot of bad movies for everyone. Like I'm not willing to sit through endless amounts of TikTok.
Yeah.
But like my wife's a high school teacher, and if you just talk to like her students, like they are way more likely to talk about like social media stuff, or like content creators, than they are about like a blockbuster movie.
Well, and I think to that point, if you ask young people today, and by young I mean like high school, middle school, I think, and I don't know, I feel like I've seen studies on this. Again, I don't have that in front of me, but I think most people, like very few people, are like, I want to be an actor, but a lot of people are like, I want to be a YouTube star or a TikTok star, or like I want to make it. Maybe they don't even say star, but like I want to do YouTube, or I want to do TikTok, and like that's how I want to make my living, and that's what I want my career to be, is that. Versus, I think in years past, there were some people who wanted to be actors, but a lot of people just were like, yeah, I just want to do a normal job or whatever. And I think now because it seems so effortless and easy to be a star on any of these social platforms.
I think that's the key. Is like, I feel like a lot of these people, like they really do want to be a movie star. It's just moving to Hollywood when you're in your 20s, and like waiting tables and trying to get an audition, when you can just like be 16 and make opening. Like, it's sort of, you can start early, and you can kind of get some traction, because a lot of them end up trying to transition into like the entertainment industry. But yeah, but I think so overall, sort of the whole like ecosystem of entertainment has changed. Like what is influencing people, and I just don't know if as Christians I feel like in general we're aware of that. We just don't always know. Like there's not easy answers for like what do you do with that. And it's easier to be outraged at this movie than it is to like wade into, just the endless sea of like the internet and creators. But I think sort of as the church, that is something that we will need to kind of a bridge that we will need to cross, or even just as we're as even as parents too, like just being aware that I don't put too much power in like every movie that comes out, but be aware like there's a whole lot of these other influencing factors that that are at play. But hey, if you guys are, again, we always encourage you guys to send in some thoughts. If you're watching us on our YouTube, jump in the comment section, share some of your thoughts of that, or else if you're listening to us, go to our Facebook page or send us an email or whatever. We'd love to hear sort of how you sort of interpret Seinfeld's quote. But speaking of the movie industry not being dead yet, there's still some new things coming. So the next segment of this episode we have out now and coming soon.
So Ryan Gosling's a pretty bankable actor, Daniel, but despite his beautiful face, Fall Guy is out now and not doing as well as hoped.
Yeah, movie industry is dead.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, so I saw this movie, and I don't think it's doing like terror. It's not a bomb.
Yeah.
But it's not a. I mean, I think it has the potential to become a bomb if it doesn't like pick up traction. But it didn't like blow the doors off anything. Like
yeah.
And you would think like coming off of Barbie and like it's a hype sort of original movie. But I like this movie.
Was it Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling?
Yeah, so
I mean those are are bankable Hollywood actors. I think.
Both. Which a commenter informed me. I didn't even think about the fact that both part of the Barbenheimer, like Emily Blunt was in Oppenheimer.
Oh yeah.
And Gosling was in Barbie. So apparently they collectively couldn't get the same magic. But this is a movie that I think last week I said I could go either way. I could just hate this movie or I could think it's fun. I don't think I loved this movie, but it is fun. Like it's a refreshing. It's original. I thought it was pretty funny, even though I don't typically even like that kind of humor of just like dudes acting kind of like fools, like kind of that Will Ferrell type humor.
Yeah.
That I don't. This is not my. Like, I don't always find that funny. But Gosling's pretty funny, so I actually did enjoy this movie.
Yeah, and you've got a full review that's up on our YouTube channel now, and something that will likely be up on the channel in the next day, maybe the day this drops or the day after, is going to be another faith-based film. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, and I'm curious of how faith-based this is. I haven't looked into like if the characters involved in this are, because Angel Studios, so I associate anything that they do as like faith-based.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't.
But I mean, I don't know. But this is
But you're seeing this.
So I'm seeing like they were nice enough to send me an advanced copy. I just haven't watched it yet, so I'll probably maybe even after this episode today, I will check this out. I think it looks interesting. I think Angel Studios has enough like traction to at least like being quality.
Yeah.
Like, this doesn't look like the kind of like huge movie that's gonna draw lots of people in. But hey, not all movies need to be like that.
But huge movies that do draw the people in and
even the
our bipedal ancestors. Apes, Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, so I'm seeing this.
Another one.
Yeah, they keep.
I thought they were done.
No, they keep taking over the planet or expanding their empire. I like these movies. I think these movies are good.
I've never seen them.
Did you see the original movie?
No, I haven't seen any of them. Is that something that do I need to put this on my list of
things that you should watch that you won't ever watch? I think apes look cool. Like I think apes, you go to the zoo, like apes are one of the coolest looking animals.
Yeah,
that's so true. Seeing a bunch of apes like riding horses, like
shooting machine guns.
So we'll see. I don't really know anything other than that apes ride horses in this one. So, but we will have I'll have my review, my thoughts. Hopefully, I like it. So could you guys check that out on the weekend? But some thoughts that I know I'm always excited to hear and always have positive opinions for. Every second week, we have the final segment of this podcast, things we like that you should like too.
So this week, it's my week, and which means that you don't have to listen to Daniel drone on about some obscure metal band. Instead, I'll bring you an obscure, well, it's not that obscure, maybe, Twitter account or X account. And it is called... The person is called Olga Tulinova. I'm probably not pronouncing that correctly. that doesn't really matter, because what matters is what this account does, and it is just an endless stream of like art from history. And the person just, they have all different styles, all different genres of art, and it's just like, it's one of the greatest things, I think, because you can just scroll through her feed, and it'll have like the artist, usually like the year, the title of the painting or sketch or whatever, and it's just in a sea of like lots of negative news and just annoyances on the internet. This Twitter account is just awesome, and it's filled with really good artwork, and it's fun. So that's what I have for you.
I mean, personally, I don't like beautiful art to get in the way of my hot takes and arguments and controversy. Like, I don't have to scroll through that to get to someone yelling about politics or movies or just whatever else. You don't even, whatever other anger. But I know there are some other, there are several sites like, or accounts and things that do things like that.
Yeah, just highlighting just from all genres and all centuries, I guess. Just various artists, which is just, to me, it's cool, and it's just a neat way to kind of discover classic art.
Like, I think I forget what the account's called. It's essentially that, but it's like retro, old school, like sci-fi concept art and stuff. And
cool.
Like, it has no, like, I just think it's cool. Like, I don't even like look into see like what it was about, or like, what this belongs to. It's just like, oh, there's a cool spaceship from someone drew in like the 60s. And,
that's awesome.
So hey, the internet is what you make it. There's some garbage out there, but there's also obscure sites that give you classic art in your feeds. And we're thankful for Sam pointing us in the right direction. But another direction that we want to point you to is next week. Hope you'll join us once again every Thursday, dropping a new episode of the Faith and Pop Culture Podcast. Always seems to be some fun stuff.
There's always something about faith and pop culture out there
going on. You never know. Maybe there'll be some big controversy that happens this week. Always some interesting stuff to get into. So we hope you will join us once again for more conversations on faith and pop culture.